Hey there guys, happy Thursday. Thanks so much for coming in tonight. I sure do appreciate it. Thanks replay viewers for being here, and thanks YouTube viewers for watching. If you'd like to watch this live, just download the Periscope app to your phone and search for Penguin and Fish. I'm here every night at 9:30 p.m. Central. I'd sure like to see you here. Alright guys, I am going to flip you around. Hello everyone! Thanks for being here tonight. I appreciate it. Happy Thursday. So we are starting a new block. It is Thursday, so it's new quilt block day for the Splendid Sampler quilt along. Here we got it. It's called Whim by Faith Jones. It is block 48, and it is some more paper piecing. However, this is going to be easy peasy. I was so excited when I saw this block today because we will be able to finish the entire block tonight. And it's going to be fun. We're going to pick fabrics out as we go. And we'll have 2 more free days before the next block comes out. So we'll be able to finish some more blocks that I have lying around. I have a lot of unfinished blocks. So we are going to do paper piecing. This will be like a really nice basic lesson in paper piecing if you're new to paper piecing. So if you're new here, my name is Alyssa Thomas from Penguin and Fish, where we make lovely and quirky hand embroidery patterns and kits. I'm the author of Sew and Stitch Embroidery and a fabric designer, and I'm here every night at 9:30 p.m. Central. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on tonight. I'm going to flip you around and we will get going here. Alrighty. We were doing paper piecing last night, so my area is all set up for paper piecing. So, alright, here's my bin of fabrics. This is, I got a little small bin. It's just like a 3-inch tall, I don't know, like 11 by 9-inch bin, something like that. And I've put all my fabrics that I'm using for the Splendid Sampler in here. We're going to just kind of pick as we go. But here we go, let's get started with the pattern first. So you have the foundation piecing template in here. There's 6 pieces, 1 through 6. And I printed out an extra copy so I can have it just with my pattern. Because we are going to actually sew directly onto the paper. Under my needle, I'm quilting. Oh, your row by row quilt. Oh, how fun. Oh, you're at the quilting stage. That's a good stage to be at. Almost done. So I'm going to cut out this block on this seam allowance line. So it's always nice to get that extra reminder that don't forget your seam allowances. So that's kind of what this is going to be. And I'm just roughly cutting it. I'm not going to use it. I'm just using it as a guide. I'm not using it to cut fabric perfectly to it. So if I get close, I'm fine. I just want to, I could paper piece directly to this, but I just wanted to reduce all the paper hanging out here. So just cutting it out. Alright. That's garbage. And so here is our template. So the numbers are the order that we're going to sew in. So we're going to start with this corner up here. Then we'll be adding 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the order we'll be doing it. So I'm going to just pick a fabric for number 1 to get going. And all these were laid out right on top. And I'm kind of, I guess I've been using these colors a lot lately. Maybe that's why they're on top. But I'm kind of liking how sweet this painty colored fabric is, and the kitties again, and then this little this red, and I'm kind of almost liking this color scheme, even though my quilt, I'm trying to go for more of these blue color schemes, although these are awfully cute too. So I think what I'm going to try and do is use some fabric that I know I have a lot of, and we'll just go. I think I am going to start with this fabric. I still have quite a bit of it. So I have some to spare. Like some like this. I only have this much left for all the rest of the Splendid Sampler, and we're not even halfway. We're just almost halfway. So I've kind of been holding off using this unless it's really needed, but you know, some of these other ones I have a lot. This kitty I have a ton of, so we'll probably use some kitty fabric. All right, so let's just start with this for our first fabric. Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm going to use something else because this is difficult to see the right and wrong side of it, and I don't want it to get too confusing. Let's use this crazy red fabric here. This will be a fun, wacky fabric to have up in the corner. So when I'm cutting fabric for paper piecing, I like to cut blobs. You want at least as big as your shape, plus a generous seam allowance, and I mean a generous. You don't want to have too less in paper piecing. You want to have enough, and yes, you'll be using a little bit more fabric, but you know what? It's way better than having to scrap your whole thing because you had too less of fabric. So I always add at least a good 1/2 inch all the way around. So you need your piece and that generous seam allowance. So there's a lot of triangles and weird shapes in here, which can sometimes be a little bit difficult with paper piecing, just wrapping your brain around it, but I have a little trick for that. So what we just need for this first piece, I always like, when I'm cutting pieces, I like to have the right side of the fabric down, because that's what will ultimately, when we sew fabric to our block here, we want the right side to be showing when we're done on the back of the paper. So that's why I like to just have it down while I'm cutting. So just for this first one, I just need to find an area where I can cut out this shape plus a generous seam allowance. So what I like to do is I pick one of the lines. Usually I pick the long line that's like the connecting line between things, and I kind of throw it on an edge. Like I give it, you know, I'm giving it my 1/2 inch seam allowance here. But, you know, I have this corner going up here, so this is a good place where I can kind of cut out a little chunk of fabric here. Actually, also up here, maybe I'd be wasting fabric a little less. And I don't think you really have to worry about being on grain or not. Like, you don't have to be perfectly this way or this way. You can be on the bias for these. I think I'm going to go right. You know what? It was easier down here. I'm just going to go down here. So I'm just going to cut blobs, meaning I'm not going to perfectly measure a 1/2 inch around or anything like that. I'm literally, without a ruler, going to just grab my rotary cutter and free cut a blob out of here. And I'm doing a generous amount. If you're just starting, you definitely want to play with generous amounts, generous seam allowances versus not. So all right, here's our first square. We don't have to worry about how perfect our seam allowances are. That is going to become perfect as we go. So all right, I'm going to just, for the first one, number one, in paper piecing we treat a little bit differently just because there's nothing holding it, there's no seams to hold it down to the paper yet. So I'm just going to put a dab of glue just on the back of that number one area. This is just washable glue, and it's like barely sticks. It'll pop right off of the paper when I'm done. But I like doing this instead of pinning. So I'm going to, with the right side facing down, the wrong side facing me, I'm going to put my number one in this fabric, making sure that I have my generous seam allowances all the way around. So I'm just going to put it right there and just stick it down. There. So technically, number one is done. There we go. Number one. So where paper piecing really starts is after your first one. And sometimes these are have letters instead of numbers, or different segments. Like if there's a block that has two separate segments, it will be like A1, A2, A3, and then the second segment will be B1, B2, B3. But in general, you just go in order what you see here. So, all right, moving on to number two. All right, so the first thing I do is this postcard trick, which I totally love. So you want to have a postcard, a thick piece of paper that's stiff, has a nice edge, and this is going to be our straight edge for this folding part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the postcard on top of whatever came before the number we're working on. So right now we're working on number 2. So number 1 came before number 2. So we're going to be working with the line in between those 2 pieces. So I'm going to put the postcard on top of the lower number, basically, right along that edge, that line there. And then I'm going to fold this up. I'm not going to worry about any of these other numbers. I'm going to just fold it the entire length of this piece. There. So I'm using the postcard to make that straight edge. So at this part, this is where we're going to get our perfect seam allowances. So I'm going to use an add a quarter ruler, but I'll show you how to do it without. An add a quarter ruler, I just learned about this on the Splendid Sampler, but it's a ruler that has this little kind of lip on it. And the lip just butts right up against this postcard, and you magically have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you might think that's really silly, like I could just, an alternative is just to get a ruler and find the 1/4 inch on there. Then you just align the 1/4 inch along the fold, and there you go, you got your 1/4 inch. But the coolest thing about paper piecing is how much of the thought process it takes out of sewing and piecing. So having the add a quarter ruler just takes that one extra thing out. I don't have to think, I just butt it up against here. I don't have to look at my measurements or anything, just butt it up against and go. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use my add a quarter. So I think I'm moving around a little bit here. My glue is coming off already. I'm moving around too much, but all right, here we go. So you see, this is not a great seam allowance. It's kind of bigger up here, skinnier down here, and it's got kind of a little weird edge. So you put the add a quarter right on that fold that we just did, and then cut. And we discard that. And now we magically have our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So even though we're cutting out all these blobs, we're gonna still have perfect seam allowances. It's kind of awesome. So all right, now I'm gonna unfold this. And we are going to get, I might have to, I'm gonna just leave it here. I'm a little worried of this glue coming off, but we'll be able to fix it. I think, actually, at this point, I think I'm just going to add pins. Usually I wouldn't do this. I would just trust that glue, but we're working with a little bit bigger pieces, so I just want to make sure that it doesn't move at this point. But I wouldn't, if you're going to pin it like this, do this whole fold and cut part first, because it's going to make it so much easier to not have these pins pushing up on your ruler. So, all right, now that'll be in place. Okay, so now on to number 2. We need to pick fabrics for that. Let's just grab something else from here. Unfortunately, I can't use my scraps because I don't have scraps that are as big as these. We could go crazy and do we could just stay in this red zone a little bit. That might be fun. I have a lot of this fabric yet, so that would be fun. I like that idea. So let's see, what do we got for edges here? All right, here's an edge with a little bit of the tree, so I kind of want some of that tree. So I'm going to cut from down here. So first of all, I'm going to give this a little bit of a press. It's a little too wrinkly. I'm just going to give that a teeny press up here. And I'm not using starch or anything. I don't think with paper piecing you really need to starch because it's going to be stabilized by the paper. So, all right. There we go. I'm going to just use this piece up here. Okay. So for these odd shapes, what I like to do, first of all, I'm going to flip this around again so that the right side is down. what I like to do is put the line that we're going to sew. So this one we're going to sew between 1 and 2, so it's this line that we folded. I like to put that line on some sort of straight edge. So I'm going to use this as my straight edge because I want to get some of this tree in. And I'm putting it on the straight edge with that generous seam allowance again, so a good half inch seam allowance. So now I can tell that. So now what I do in a couple different ways. Sometimes when I don't want to think at all, I'll just pretend that this is the straight edge of a rectangle and make a rectangle that will fit in the whole shape plus the generous seam allowance. So if you cut a rectangle like this, and then you sew along this straight edge, you know that that's going to cover up your shape. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to cut a piece that's big enough to do this shape. But, with triangles and weird shapes like this, it gets confusing. Like, it's hard to know if your shape's going to work. Yep, blob time. But in this case, so that's one thing you can do. You can just put the folded edge along a straight edge and then pretend that straight edge is a rectangle and then cut a rectangle that's going to encompass your entire number, so number 2, plus a seam allowance. So this goes all the way up to here, so we do need that rectangle this big. However, in this case, it's going to use up a lot of fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, as long as you still have this along an edge, your fold along the edge, and your fabric's facing down, I can basically mimic this shape when I cut out, and it should still work. So I'm gonna give that a try. I'm going to cut with a generous seam allowance again, a shape that looks like this, and we'll see if it works. And I'm gonna cut it here because I'll get a lot of this tree, and I think that's pretty. So first of all, let's place this. I want at least the half-inch seam allowance up here, and the seam allowance right here. She did give us cutting sizes, so I like the blob method. So if you're really worried about doing it this way, she did give us our rectangles for us already. So that piece 2, 4-inch by 6-inch rectangle, 4.25 inch by 6-inch rectangle. I'm guessing that's about what it would be if we did it this way, where we're pretending, we can even check. Where'd my ruler go? So I was suggesting cutting, putting the fold along the straight edge and then cutting a rectangle that would encompass that whole thing. My guess is it's probably pretty close to the 6 and 4.25. So this is 6.5. So yeah, so there's 6. Here's the tip here. And the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. Yeah, so we're just about there. So we're kind of just doing the same thing, but eyeballing it, and it's going to work just the same way. So, all right, but to do it the blob way, where, I don't have to have all those perfect rectangles, I'm going to just kind of draw a blob that's the shape of this. I'm going to just move my paper as I go. We'll just go, it goes to the point right there, so I need it to go a little further than that. And then it goes to here. And then there. That looks like a pretty good blob. And again, the easiest way is probably just to do that rectangle, but this blob method works really well if you're using scraps and you want to cut a piece or you just have a piece that's way bigger. We'll probably get to that on some of these smaller pieces here. So, all right. Now, normally I would cut the straight edge again just to make sure it's super straight, but this is plenty straight. So this is the straight edge that is going to go along, so we just cut it like this. It's going to go along this edge here. Yeah, so you can fussy cut and play with this too. So we're going to do a test. So I like testing it sometimes, especially with oddball shapes and weird shapes in the design. So to test, we're going to line up our seam allowance. So this is that perfect seam allowance that we cut. and with right sides together. This is the straight edge that we just did. So I'm going to flip that over. You know, honestly, I actually like the tiny paper piecing more than these big ones, like the whole block. I think it's so much easier to have tiny pieces where your fabric isn't flopping around and everything. I'm actually going to take these pins out now and use those to test. So to test, I'm going to pretend sew along our line. So this is the line that we are going to be sewing on. So I'm going to just put pins along that line as if I have sewn it. Get in there. All right. So the reason for this is we want to test to see if this piece is covering this oddball shaped piece. So, all right, so we've pretend sewn it, and now we're going to pretend iron it open. So just give it like a light finger press. Smaller blobs. I can use up tiny bits. Exactly. So that's why I like the small paper piece things instead of these big ones. So all right, so we did our test. So now we just have to make sure that our piece that we cut has covered our entire shape that we're cutting plus our seam allowance. So, I mean, we're obviously good right here. You know, this goes right to here. Oh yeah, there's plenty. That is a good, that's almost an inch. Over here, yeah, plenty and plenty. So our blob is perfectly large enough. We're ready to sew. But that's how you do a test. And I tend to test when there's odd shapes or there's triangles because those can get a little confusing. Or I cut a piece that's really close to the size of this. Like if I cut this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I would be doing a lot of tests. And I'd probably be, you know, if it was too far this way after my test, I'd undo the pins and move it a little this way, and I'd keep moving it around until you get it so that your fabric covers your shape plus that seam allowance. So that's why I like doing bigger than pieces that I need, because I'm pretty much always going to have a big enough piece. Like this, you saw it was way big. I had like almost an inch all the way around. I wouldn't have had to do this test because I knew that this was huge. So that saves me time, not having to do this pin thing all the time. But sometimes, again, with odd shapes and triangles, I do like doing the test just because they freak me out. I always feel like I'm going to do them a little wrong. So, all right, now we're on to sewing. And tricky triangles, exactly. So for sewing, some things that you want to do is you want to reduce your stitch length. So I've just turned my dial. I can show you the dial over here, I think. Yeah, so this bottom one, I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but this bottom one is my stitch length. I usually stitch with it on the 12. And if I turn it this way, the stitch length gets shorter. So I just make sure I turn it a little bit so I have smaller stitches. And the reason I'm doing that is because every time you sew, it's going to poke a hole into your paper, right? Every stitch, yeah, boy, old again more. Every stitch you do is going to poke a hole into your paper. So you're basically making perforated paper. So the closer those holes are to each other, the easier it's going to be to tear out the paper later because the perf holes are closer together. So that's why, at least in my brain, that's why you do the smaller stitch length. So, all right, we are going to sew exactly along that line in between 1 and 2. And whenever a line is connected to a seam allowance, like the outside seam allowance, that's what this is here, I like stitching into the seam allowance as well. So I'm going to stitch into the seam allowance on both edges. If you're meeting in the middle, like a piece like this, I would stop right exactly on that line. I would not go into this number 5 here. But again, if it's on the seam allowance, I tend to stitch in there. And I'm also going to back tack. It's not really as important for these seam allowances, but it makes it a little stronger. So when you're pulling the paper off, it's not coming undone. And especially here, you want to back tack on the inside points just so it doesn't fall apart when you tear the paper. And back tacking, that's just where you reverse like a stitch or two on your machine before going forward again. So, all right, I'm going to turn on the machine, I suppose. Almost forgot to do that. And I'm going to get rid of this pin now. Let's try and get you guys in focus so we can see a little better. There we go. So I'm going to stitch right along that line and a little bit of this seam allowance. And I'm going to back tack it. There. So the awesome thing about paper piecing is that I don't have to worry about my perfect scant 1/4 inch or a seam allowance. All I have to do is stitch right on the line. We were talking last night because I was paper piecing last night, and it's just like how you would teach a kid how to sew, you know, like try and stitch onto these lines and shapes and that sort of thing. So it's just the same thing. I kind of think of it like a coloring book. We're just staying in the lines, but we're staying right on the line. All right, and back tack, and there we go. We did our first stitch. So here's our stitching between 1 and 2, and that's all there is to it. Now, step 3 is pressing. So I like to think of paper piecing as 3 steps. We do the fabric, so like the blobs and the postcard, then we sew, then the iron. You know, blob, sew, iron, blob, sew, iron. So we are at the ironing bit. Oh, you know what? First of all, I forgot one little thing. Whenever I'm done sewing, I immediately snip the ends off, because that's gonna, of the threads, that's gonna get annoying super duper fast. It's just gonna cause a bunch of trouble, so it's good. I got this extra one there. Good to just snip those right away. Okay, now to sewing, or pressing. So when I press, I want to have the printed side down on my board, because with a lot of ink, I mean mine's laser toner ink, if I press on it, it's going to transfer to my iron and it's going to get all my fabric dirty from then on out. So I'm going to press onto my ironing board. So it is making my ironing board a little bit dirty, so if you're worried about that, you might want to put a towel down or some freezer paper or something, just so it doesn't get your iron all, or your ironing board all icky, but mine's pretty icky already. So I'm going to just press the seam just to kind of set the seam. And I'm going to finger press it first. I like finger pressing these before I do the final press. Mostly because I've only sewn from here to here, so I have all these bits out here that aren't part of the block that aren't sewn, so they're harder to fold. So I like finger pressing it so I can give it a little fold before I start with the iron. But there we go. Just press it so it's nice and flat, that seam. These are kind of weird next to each other. They're kind of pretty similar fabrics from here, like that red. All right, that was probably a little long, but there we go. So that is number 1 and 2, and it looks like a pile of crazy right now, but that's the fun part of paper piecing. It looks crazy until it all comes together. It's kind of awesome, and we have perfect seam allowances this whole entire time too. So when we take the paper off, our seam allowances are gonna be pretty magic too. So all right, that was 1 and 2. Moving on to number 3. So again, let's get the postcard out. We are going to fold between the number we're on now, which is 3, and everything that came before. So that's this line right here. So I'm going to put the postcard right on that line. I'm going to cover up what I already did with the postcard so that the new number is exposed. So just like this. And I want it to extend, my postcard to extend the entire length of my paper here. So now I'm going to fold, and again, I'm going to pretend these other older or the later numbers aren't there. We're not going to worry about that. And I'm going to fold along this entire edge. And there's our blob revealed. So I'm going to grab the add a quarter, tuck that right on there, and trim scraps. And now we got our perfect seam allowance again. And we don't have to do glue or anything this time because it's being held, our fabrics are being held down by this seam now. So we don't have to worry about our seam allowance moving or anything like that. We're attached. So all right, next let's pick what fabric we want for that. So let's peek at what we got here. It's this little piece down here. You know, I kind of like, you know, we've introduced this blue. You know, we started with these reds, and oh, I guess this blue is here too. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking maybe a blue could be kind of fun down there. Like this is too teal, I think, but you know, something like this might be good. Now I do barely have any of this left, but this is my own fabric, so I have a bolt of this fabric. So I think I'm going to use this. In all the other cases, if I only have this much left, I probably won't use it. But this, like I said, I got yards and yards of it. Okay. And I'm choosing this because it has pops of these really light blues in here. So it just, here's some, and this is a little bird. So I thought this kind of would be fun. And I'm totally just making those decisions as I go. I mean, I didn't really have that planned out. I just thought, oh, red is kind of fun. All right, let's do another red. Okay, now there's some blue, and oh, we have that light blue. Well, I have a bunch of light blues. Let's use this. And since I have a lot of fabric of this in storage, that's good. And so that's how I'm kind of making my decisions. I'm going to just trim this little thread that's hanging out here. I don't really have a big master plan or anything. So, all right. We got like this little square. There's this little nubbin coming off of that. Maybe we can use that. Let's check out our, what do I got going on here? Oh, there's just like a little loose thread that's giving me a little bump, but I think we're fine. All right, so number 3. Oh, you know what? So this fabric, it's really difficult to tell the right side and the wrong side. So this is the right side. I am putting the right side down. You know what, I'm going to just give that a really quick press. I don't have to flip you guys up for that. There we go. So I am putting the right side is down, even though it doesn't look like it. All right, so here is this line that we're going to sew. So I'm going to do that blob method again, where I'm hoping it can fit in this piece here, because it would be awesome to use up this shape. So I'm going to use this as my edge of the rectangle. So right there. So I want to angle it this way. And already we can see that we're kind of having a problem. I don't have that big of a seam allowance. So and over here I didn't give myself enough seam allowance. So I have a pretty generous seam allowance up there. And we have a seam allowance built in here. So I think this will be enough. We have enough over here. But this is cutting it pretty close. But that's why it's good to do this method where you have this along the line, because I could have just cut this piece, and then after jiggering it at the angles that this is at, it might have totally not worked at all. But if you do it this way with your fabric right side facing down, your sewing line, I'm going between 3 and the 2 right now. That sewing line is along the straight edge with a seam allowance, so I'm parallel to that. Then I can kind of see, okay, I have this much space here. So I'm going to cut a blob like this and up here, just following this shape a little, and then we'll just cut up at that angle. There. And that should be good to go. Blob. And you know what? I'm going to trim. This is my straight edge. That's going to match up to this straight edge. So I just, it's got a lot of frayed. So I'm just going to quickly just trim that so I got a better straight edge. You want a really nice straight edge. Oh, look, it's a little arched too even. So let's clean that up. All right, so this is the straight edge that is now, when we flip this, gonna match up to this straight edge. So, you know, again, this is the wrong side. You know, this right side is really close looking to the wrong side. So because this was so close, you know, we were really cutting it close to the edges. I want to do my test because do I need to put it over here or do I need to put it over here? I'm not positive. So I'm going to just kind of center it in there where I kind of think, you know, it'll probably go. And we're going to run our little test. So, oops, yeah. So to test, again, we're going to grab our pins and we're going to pretend sew. Our seam allowances are, the straight edge are together on the other side, and we're going to pretend sew. That's close enough. Pretend sew along the line. This really works better if you do at least two pins, not just one. It'll pivot funny with just one. So, all right, there we go. Now we're going to pretend press along that seam allowance that we pretend sewed and flip it around. Oh, we're plenty good. So, look, the seam allowance again has to be big enough for our number plus the seam allowance around, and we're plenty good. I can see all the seam allowance here. You know, we got plenty going on here. We're good to go. We can sew. But again, I might have placed it over here a little too far and then realized, oh, I am cutting off my edge right here. I gotta scooch it this way. So that might have been something we discovered. But right now we're good. When in doubt, especially if you're starting, you definitely want to do this sewing test. And again, if you have a bunch of rectangles that you're paper piecing, it's not so crucial because that's easy to picture. But with all these angles, it can get a little funky in your head. So this test is really helpful. All right, so stage one, now back to sewing, and then ironing. You know, we're doing that triad thing. So back to the machine. And so this time we are going to sew along the line between 3, which is the number we're working on now, and everything that came before. So that's this line right here. It touches the outside seam allowance, so I am going to sew into that seam allowance again. But over here, where it cuts into this 4, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to back tack right at that end. I'm going to go to boldly for no reason embroider. Oh, embroidery on the seam. See, that'd be really cute. So this design kind of looks like a traditional crazy quilt. And a crazy quilt has a bunch of fun shapes like this that are kind of all over the place. And typically it was decorative embroidery stitches were made on each of the seams. So I've seen a few people on the Facebook page doing that, and I think it's just really pretty. And if I wasn't completely behind on my blocks, I would maybe consider that too. Oh yeah, to dress it up, that's a great idea. All right, so I'm gonna just sew. You know, when we paper piece with the smaller pieces too, like the other blocks that have like pieces this big and stuff, where you can just use your little scraps, you don't have to use as many pins either, because it's not gonna move around everywhere. It's with these bigger pieces, pins are kind of good because, you know, your fabric's so much floppier. So, doesn't hurt to pin. I mean, for these, I have it in for my testing of it anyway, so this doesn't, I mean, this, might as well just leave them there, right? All right. All right, so I'm going to stop right at that 4 and back tack. There we go. And that is done. All right, so I'm going to snip and snip the ends right away. So we're halfway done. There's 6 total, and we have 3 done here, just about. All right, next is the pressing. So again, I'm going to put the paper side, or the printing side down. Just give it a little press to get going. And now I'm going to finger press. so I can get those ends and press. All right, that's plenty good. And there is number 3. And so now you can see we're starting to shape our design in the middle here. So it all comes together as we keep adding shapes. All right, next up. So now we're at the beginning of the process again with 4. So let's do our postcard again. So again, we're leaving 4 exposed and covering up all the parts that we did already. And we're going to disregard the other numbers that we haven't done yet. Fold up along the seam across the whole edge. So we got a couple blobs going on here, right? But with the postcard method, get rid of those, and now we have our perfect seam allowance again. It's just so fun. Makes things easy. Okay, now what color should we do that for? Let's see. You know what? I think, why don't we just keep going like darker blue or something. My quilt is generally, you know, at least when I started out with it, I wanted it to be these blues, but more and more of these reds, and I got some yellows and some white stuff. That seems to be popping up more and more, so I don't know, let's try and maybe bring it back to the blues a little bit. You know, I just grabbed this. This isn't really blue. I want to go in that blue. But also, I'm kind of running out of my blues too, so maybe I don't want to do blues. But it really kind of showcases the fabric, which I like, with these big blocks. Oh, what's this one? This one has maybe this one. This one has a bunch of, this has like little flecks of this red in, so that might be kind of fun. Ooh, we have this weird teal too. We could end up with, do what the quilt wants exactly. So maybe we do this, and then since it has some of this teal in, we're doing this because it's that blue, and then plus it has this red, so that relates back to this. And then maybe we do this fabric next, just because I like it, because it's kitties, and I have a ton of it, which is great. And it kind of goes with this tealy blue in here, so I think it'll all mesh together. So, all right, we got a plan for the next 2. That's nice. Oh, you know what? Maybe we bring back this again, too, because this has all those colors in. Oh, that'd be fun. I'm going to hold on to that, too. All right. I'm liking it. All right, but first we are going to do this color. All right, so, you know, ideally I'd want to use an edge over here, but let's look at our piece. Okay, so this might work perfect, that edge, because it might just fit. So I'm going to just press this really quick, again, just so we can see what we're working with a little bit better. All right, so I'm going to put it face down. And so this is our fold line again. So this is the line that we're going to pretend is our edge. So I'm going to just kind of put it here at this, you know, so we have our 1/2 inch straight edge here. Let's see what it's looking like up there. So this does have a cut in it here, so we got to be aware of that. So my 1/2 inch has got to start like right here. Oh, we can move up a little bit, I think. There, I think that's good. So then we just cut our blob like this, and I think we'll be good. I wonder if I can move up a little bit more. I don't think I can because of that cut. So let's just trim this, and we can cut into this now too. It doesn't really matter because we're done with that. All right, so then the blob kind of goes up here, and then it cuts. We'll just cut all the way up like that. There. Funny looking shape there. All right. So let's give this a test again. So this matches up with this straight edge here. I like testing the triangles. They freak me out. So, all right, we lined up the edges kind of where we think it should probably go. All right, so I'm holding it down, flip it over. Oh, I think we got totally plenty of space. But I do have to check too because it had that cut out of it and I'm not quite sure where that is. So let's pin this first along the seam allowance. or not the seam allowance, along that stitch line. And then we'll, oh, see, so here's that cut. I gotta be aware that this cut doesn't bother us. So when we're checking, I gotta make sure that we do that. So, all right, we're gonna pretend press open. Ooh, that's gonna be crazy, this block. All right, well, we got plenty down here. Again, we're trying to cover this number 4 plus its big seam allowance. We got like more than enough down here. We might actually have to move it up. We'll see. Plenty over here, but here's where my concern is. So here's the point. Where does that cut go? Okay, so the cut's right here. So I gotta pretend that it goes to here. Oh, and we still have quite a bit of seam allowance, like a good 1/2 inch between us and the cut. So we're plenty good. But if the cut was coming into this a little bit much, since we had enough fabric down here, we could have just scooched this a little bit to the left, and then it would have, then this cut would have been out of our way for sure. But we're perfectly fine. That's why I like cutting big pieces. Yes, you're using up. I mean, you know, my leftover scraps are pretty big, but I'm gonna actually use all of these later in the Splendid Sampler quilt. I've been saving every single little bit of thread and scrap, and I'm actually gonna make a new fabric out of all this. Actually, you can see it. I don't know if some of you guys might have downloaded that free Be Brave with a little bumblebee on. My finished, it's on the Splendid Sampler in the bonus projects area, but on that one I made a fabric out of scraps, and I'm hoping to do that again for this. So maybe, you know, we have 2 free days coming up. Maybe one of these free days, either tomorrow or the next day, maybe we'll make some of this fabric, because I'm kind of overflowing here, so I'd like to use this up. Oh, you did that one! Oh, yay! I'm so happy that you did the bee. Oh, you got the bee. You're ready to embroider. Oh, that's so cool. I'd love to see them. Like, email me them if you haven't yet. Are you putting all your videos on YouTube? Yes. So this video will for sure be there. All of these Splendid Sampler videos are up. They are at YouTube, and my channel is Penguin&Fish Movies. If you search for the Splendid Sampler or like block whatever, it may pop up too. But if you just do Penguin&Fish Movies, that's my channel. So a lot of the earlier blocks, I don't have all those up because that was being saved somewhere else before I started uploading them to YouTube. But all the current blocks, you know, at least from like, I don't know, 30 on are for sure on YouTube. But yeah, so this one will go up tomorrow morning. So all right, we are ready to sew. We're all pinned. Now we're going, again, this number 4 goes into the seam allowance. So we're gonna stitch in that seam allowance, and then, you know, we're gonna back tack it right here on that 5. So flip over here, and we will do that. So I've been chit-chatting and showing you guys stuff for this paper piecing today, but you know, if you just got into the groove of doing this would go super fast. You'd go your 3 areas, and it would just get snappier and snappier. You know, I'm sitting explaining and stuff and chit-chatting, so it's taking me a little bit longer. But in theory, you could have probably done this block in, I don't know, 40 minutes probably. Depends how quick you are in picking fabrics and stuff, too, I suppose. Thanks so much for coming in, Jean. Alright. Snip. And we'll trim these. I always turn my machine off just because the light kind of messes with the camera here. But I'm sure you can just leave your sewing machine on. Snip these. Alright, let's go up to pressing. Just 2 more after this, and then we'll do the final trim around the edge, and we'll be done. So we'll zip through the next 2, because I think we're getting the idea now. So again, finger pressing, so I can get those outer edges. All right. 2 more. Man, this is looking like a pile of crazy, but that's sort of the point, I think. Using all my weird, crazy fabrics. All right, let's flip around. Ooh, 5, it's a big one. Let's do kitties for the 5. I think we can probably get a few cats in there. All right, so our postcard. Kitties. Along that 5, between 5 and everything else that happened before, and we're going to forget that exists. The numbers that are higher. Ooh, I'm not holding that very well. There we go. And a quarter ruler. So here's all that crazy, here's our cut that we were all worried about. All that's getting cut off now. And we're just left with our perfect seam allowance, which is awesome. All right, kitty fabric. So here is that straight edge that we're going to be working with. Got a kick out of the Wisconsin homesick candle. I know. I'm from Wisconsin, so I picked that one. But they have some for a bunch of different states, and all the states have different smells. I was actually I was looking for a North Dakota one because my husband's from North Dakota, but they don't have a North Dakota one yet. I was sad, but they did have a Wisconsin one. I'm tempted to get one of those. And the smell for Wisconsin sounded like it was going to be really good. They described it as like a fresh Kringle with some like wintry fresh smells, and I thought it sounded so nice. But yeah, I saw that must have popped up on Facebook. Someone what we're talking about is there's this candle company who makes candles, and the name of the candle is Homesick. And then they have it for each state. So it's Homesick, and then Texas, and Homesick, Alabama, Homesick, Wisconsin. And each candle has its own flavor that's kind of what you would think from, like Georgia would probably be like a fruity, peachy cobbler smelling, candle. So it's just kind of just the cutest idea, and I posted that on my Facebook page today, or or shared it, just because I thought it was just the sweetest. Okay. So I'm not going to fussy cut. I mean, I'm going to get a kitty somewhere in here, and even if I just end up with lines, I'm okay with that. I'm going to use, let's see. Yeah, you know what, I'm just going to use this straight edge here. So again, I'm lining this straight edge with my edge here, plus the seam allowance. I need more space here. There it is. All right, so like that. Does this have a cut into? Yeah, but not too bad. And I can move up a little. So then I'm going to just cut the shape of this 5 out. With the generous seam allowance. I mean, you always want that generous seam allowance. Let's go up this way. And we'll just snip right up there like that. So about right there. Something like that. Oops, we're still attached. All right. We will test this for sure, because I think I cut this one pretty close. But I didn't really press this, but I think we'll be fine. So there's our straight edge. If you don't start out with a straight edge, you can cut your straight edge first, but I'm using kind of areas where we got a decent straight edge. So this will, this goes right here. All right, and I kind of can flip back and forth to check to get a good starting position. We're going to go right like this. I'm going to flip and pin. So what we're doing here is exactly how you would do every other paper piecing project. The Splendid Sampler has a whole pile of paper piecing, so no matter, even if you're working with the itsy bittiest, teeniest pieces, this is the exact same process. The only difference, like I said, is if there's more than one section that you're cutting out. So this is all numbered 1 through 6. Other blocks might have different sections, so you might have this plus another piece, and then those pieces get sewn together at the end. And this first piece would be like A1, A2, A3, and then the next piece would be B1, B2, B3. You do each of those letters by themselves. So in this case, we don't have that. We just have the one set of numbers, so we didn't have to split this up beforehand. So this is as easy as you can get, basically. But it's the same thing. Do you give seam allowances between, like, the letters? Yes, seam allowances all the time. And these big extra seam allowances. And sometimes you'll get a paper piecing thing like this that doesn't have the outside seam allowance. So then you have to remember that as well. You have to remember, okay, I got to add my seam allowance to this too. And again, go for your big, a 1/2 inch to 1 inch seam allowances. Go for your big blobs. You're going to be so happy you did in the end, because it's a huge bummer to have your piece when you've sewn it and you flipped it around and then you're missing like a whole corner here because your piece wasn't big enough on accident. You have to take that all out, and it's difficult to work with your paper and stuff after that. So bigger is better. But yes, exact same process no matter what. It's just always remembering your big seam allowances. So yeah, so remember, even if your seam allowance isn't in the design, you always got to be adding it all the way around. Even with the lettered ones, it's the same exact thing. So all right, we're pinned. Oh yeah, we're gonna test sew. So here's our test press. Plenty good. We got plenty seam allowance, so great. And the bigger seam allowances you have like that, the more big blobs that you're cutting, the less work it is, because it's going to cover it all. You can just sew right away. It's going to save you time. And the whole thing, like I was saying earlier with paper piecing, is that it takes a lot of the thinking out of the way. I'm going to remove this pin already. Like, I don't have to think about my scant quarter. I just sew along the line. I don't have to think about my ruler. I just do the add a quarter ruler. I don't have to worry about cutting perfect shapes. I just cut out blobs. All that is awesome about paper piecing. So that the more, basic, the more traditional piecing type tips and stuff that you can get rid of with paper piecing, that makes paper piecing just that much more relaxing. I like it. It's deceptively simple. Like, once you get into this rhythm, you'll totally get the hang of it. Once you get the picture of making your blobs, you'll feel that sense of like, oh, I don't have to measure, and oh, I just, I don't have to worry about my seam allowance, my scant quarter seam allowance when you sew normally, and it just takes away all that. You can start to feel like your chest just open up and, relax. And it's awesome. It's really one of those crafts, paper piecing, where you can just chill and get into your rhythm without much thinking once you get a handle on it. Ooh, I'm liking how all these blues are coming together with this red. It's kind of fun. One more piece, guys, and then we'll wrap it up. I know we're going a little late today. I'm kind of explaining a lot of things, but hopefully it's a little helpful. So there we are. We can start seeing our shapes, and we'll trim this all down too. So all we have left is number 6 there. Okay, so we start out with the postcard, exposing 6, and covering up everything else. More makeup time tomorrow, I know, right? I'm excited. So we'll have Friday and Saturday to work on blocks, and maybe I will one of those days try and do this making kind of a fabric. That might be a fun little project that will alleviate some of my space issues over here, because my scrap bag is getting pretty full. All right. And we are going to use this for the last piece. I bet you there's a little tiny area that we can use on here. I guess over in this section. So I'm going to just press that really quickly. So this piece is that piece where the right side and the wrong side look almost exactly the same, so it gets a little tricky. So this is the right side. I'm going to put the right side down, so you see what I mean? It looks just about the same. That's why I didn't want to do this piece first, because I thought it'd be a little confusing, but now we're pros. All right, I'm going to do it right down here, even though I didn't really press this area, but I have this kind of little archway coming up here. I'm thinking I can get a triangle to kind of come up that archway here. So again, I'm putting this edge here along my straight edge here with the, that 1/2 inch seam allowance or so. And this is plenty here. I can even scooch it down a little, I think. All right, how's that back looking still? Good. So I'm just gonna go bloop bloop, and that will be our blob for this. I'll just move that away. I think we can even just connect it here and be good. There we go, blob. All right, so flip. This is there, like this. And you know what? I don't think we need to do a test for this one. I think let's just go for it. So I'm not even going to pin this one. I'm just going to hold it there. So this is, again, much easier when we're working with those itty-bitty pieced blocks. Bigger blocks like this one, it is actually kind of helpful to pin. But I'm just going to hold both edges and flip it over, and we should be fine. And I'm not sewing on any fancy machine or anything. I mean, you don't need anything like that to do paper piecing at all. All right. Snip off these little ends. So we just sewed our last line. I actually was a little off. I'm not completely on that line, but that's okay. That might be a problem on the itsy bitsy blocks, but in general, it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it can be once you get really detailed, but for something like this, it's not going to matter so much. So let's set the seam, press it open. Oh, I kind of like how these are at an angle. I didn't even think about that. All right, now we just have to trim this guy and we're done. Okay, so let's look at it. So this is our crazy block right here. So, we still have all these blobs around the outside, so let's clean that up. So now I'm going to grab just a little bit bigger ruler. So I'm not going to worry about this outer edge. Like I said, I just cut that kind of roughly. I'm going to use this line, the actual line of our block, as my guide. So I'm going to just put a 1/4 inch rule line on that line. I'm not going to line it up against this edge that I cut. This is a more accurate line, so I'm going to use that. So, all right, got the 1/4 inch. So snip that. See, I snipped a little paper too, which is good. Side 2. Yay, I'm so excited that we did a block in one sitting. I'm not sure I've done that yet in the Splendid Sampler. Maybe one other block, maybe we've done it in one sitting, but in general, they've usually at least taken 2. It's rare that I have 2 free days before the next block is released. I wonder if that means that the Sunday block is going to be super intricate. I wonder if this is a sign, but I don't know, who knows. It will be fun to find out. All right, here's our last thing. Oh wait, you know what? Technically we're not done yet. We gotta take all the paper off, so I'll do that yet too. There's not that much to take off. But all right, so here is what our final block looks like. It's fun. I like it. I like how we did the colors. We just picked colors that were in the fabric before and kind of did that route. So I don't know. I'm kind of digging it. This is kind of a pretty good representation of what my quilt as a whole is going to look like. It's a lot of blues, and then these reds seem to be seeping in. So all right, let's take off the paper. So because we sewed with that the shorter stitch length, we have all these little holes. So those are like little perforations, like on normal like perforated paper. So we can just tear those out. So I'm just gonna, and this block is big, so it's gonna be really easy to do. But look, as we start tearing out, there we're revealing our perfect seam allowances. So it's just so fun, I think, that we can start off with crazy blobs and still have. Oops, here's that one that I glued. See that just comes right off. We can start with blobs, but still end up with perfect seam allowances, as if someone who is a perfect perfectionist, who's always perfect, stitched it, all up. We're getting the same effect without having to think about it. So that's kind of magical, I think. Magical paper piecing. Oops, it's a little rough down there. The most satisfying part, ripping the paper. I don't know. I mean, I like ripping the paper. I like being done. I like revealing the seam allowances, but sometimes tearing off the paper, I don't know. To me, it's a little annoying. Let's get these little guys out. I think usually at this stage, I always think I'm done, and then I'm like, oh wait, I gotta do all the paper. So it's like a little psychological blow that I didn't do the paper yet. Oh, you know what? I do like that. The sound of the paper is very satisfying. I do agree with that completely. It is a good sound. There, but now you can start seeing all our perfect seam allowances. It's kind of awesome. And this should just pop right out. And there we go. So there's our perfect back. It's amazing that we can get all that perfect with our blobs. And there we go. Our crazy front. We got some crazy kitties in there. I think that's fun. So there we go. That is block 48 of the Splendid Sampler done in one night. So all right, guys, I'm going to flip you around, and we will call it an evening. Hey there. So that was fun. So that is paper piecing. And like I said, no matter how intricate, you're going to do this same exact process. The folding with the postcard with the big seam allowance, then the sewing, then the pressing, and you just keep doing that triad of things over and over again. But here's the block. Sometimes I always like seeing it with a person, so you can get a sense of how big it really is. It was fun choosing fabrics as we went too. So yay, I'm happy with it. Excited to have a couple of free days tomorrow. So all right, guys, this will be up on YouTube at Penguin and Fish Movies. And I will be here tomorrow, 9:30 Central. So have a great night, guys, and thanks again so much for hanging out with me. I sure do appreciate it a ton. So see you guys tomorrow. Good night.